Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episodes and we come up with very interesting idea about smart city developments and a different concept of the development of the civilization, especially in the COVID period, how we should focus on the smart city projects and other things. We have Professor Huang. Hello, Professor, as well as we
Hi.
have Professor Sun. Hello. Yes. How are you today?
Hello, how are you
Good.
doing?
Thank you.
Yes.
Good?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. I think Professor Sun already he joined with us in World Talent Economy Forum. So I want to ask Professor Huang first. Can you please introduce yourself and with our audience?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Youqin Huang. I'm a professor in geography and planning at State University of New York, University at Albany. Just a little bit about my research. My research has focused on understanding market transition in China and how that affect people. People's behavior, their well-being, inequality in the society, and so on. My research has focused on two main areas, two somewhat different but related areas. One is housing. So I study home ownership, housing affordability, low-income housing, housing inequality. So that's the first area. The other area I focus on is migration. So I study massive migrants in China and how migration has affected them and their families, their well-being in the cities, and so on.
Mhm. Thank you, Professor. I want to ask question to Professor Sun. Already you introduce yourself, and you have more focus on geography and other things. So can you please help us to understand the concept of smart city, because we are working with many developing nations, not only in Malaysia, even South Asia, Asia Pacific, other markets. Can you please introduce this smart city concept with us? Yes.
Okay, and well, some of you may know me, some of you may not know me, but and Professor Huang and me, we have been know each other for almost 2 decades, and he graduated from Peking University, the best one in China. I graduated from Nanjing University, used to be the best one. So now, of course, Beijing is much better than Nanjing University. And we both came to the States for graduate students and the degrees. And then she went to much better school than what I did. She went to UCLA and got her PhD there. And then I went to SUNY Buffalo. And then now I should shift to LA, and she went to SUNY Albany. Well, we switched. It's called a geography switch, space and temporal switch. In terms of today's topic, because your original topic is on sustainable urban and community development. And then now we are talking about the smart city or smart city region. Yeah, everybody tries to say smart. We want to be smart. Leaders want to be smart. An organization want to be smart. And the cities want to be smart. Country want to be smart. That's a good thing. At least nobody wants to be dumb, stupid. That's a good thing. But in terms of what is a smart city?
Yes, I think Professor San has some problem with internet connections. So, Professor Huang, can you please help us to
I
introduce? Yes.
think depends on who you are talking to. And ultimately, I think it's about the future of city regions, not on individual. Depends on who you are, depends on what you do, depends on what job you have, depends on smart city.
Mhm. I think he has some internet problem. If you help us for our audience, because audience also joining. Humaira Tanzila, she said, "Hello everyone, welcome to World Talent Economy Forum. We hope it is a great session. Thank you for your time and presence. And thank you, ma'am. Like, can you please help us to introduce this smart city concept? So when Professor San will join, definitely we will interact with him.
Right, looks like Professor Sun needs to upgrade his infrastructure. But as Professor Sun was talking about that, it really depends on who you're talking to. You know, everybody has a definition for smart city, and they all have somewhat different sort of emphasis and focus. But it's such a catchword. Everybody is talking about it. So, you know, for mayors, for policymakers, you know, they have their emphasis. But for scholars and for the population, they probably have very different emphasis. I think so far, a lot of talking about the smart city really focused on the technology itself, how we can use technology to facilitate the economic development, to facilitate the governance of the city. But as a social scientist, I think so the social aspect of the smart city has been sort of downplayed. I mean, there are scholars out there arguing that we need to have a more holistic view of the smart city, not just technology, not just using the technology to govern the population, but you know, from based on my research, is I feel the social smart city should be really to improve the quality and well-being of the people, and that should be the ultimate goal for smart city. Professor Stone is back now.
Yes, Professor San. Yes,
infrastructure need to be a little smarter.
Yeah. We need to use a Huawei technology, not to rely on Ericsson or Nokia. So Trump already banned the technology from China. That does not no good to make Americans smart.
Understand.
Yeah. Anyway, so Youqin talk about the social aspect. I think it's a big step from whatever is defined, whatever most people have in mind, what is called smart city, right? So most often right now people think, oh, we need to fly in cars like Elon Musk. We need to have AI. We need to have smart grid. We need to have smart green building. Yes, I'm not saying those are not important. Those are really important in terms from the technological perspective. Now, I think we're focusing too much on the hard part. I call it hard part, technology. Everybody, we need to have 5G. We need to have AI. We need to have big data. We need to have green something. Yongwei is up. I think Yongwei is trying to do something, say something, concept. Not just a focus on narrative. We need that, but that's not enough. We do think from people on the need.
Yes, Professor Huang, like if you take the lead, because sometimes he has some problem with this internet connection. I'm sorry, audience, they are actually add with us, but somehow internet problem. That's why Professor San actually cannot explain it properly. I want to give a floor to Professor Huang. Yeah.
Thank you. I think what Professor Sun just said is sort of corresponding to what I said earlier, that a lot of people out there, especially the policymakers, you know, they focus on their hard aspect, as Professor Sun said. So it's the technology, the infrastructure, but they tend to ignore the soft side, the social aspect, as I mentioned. So I would sort of, you know, encourage people to really think about how to incorporate or how to achieve the soft goal, like say inclusion, like say equity, the justice, and so on. Use the technology. I think the technology is only the tool; it's not the goal. So we want to use the technology to achieve the ultimate goal, to have a just, inclusive, equitable city. So that should be really what the smart city is about. I think for a lot of policymakers, the mayors, and so on, even when they think of the soft aspect, they are using technology to sort of control and manage population. to enhance the governance, not so much to sort of improve the well-being and the quality of life for its population. So I think there's a lot of room for us to really explore the concept of smart cities and think about what is the ultimate goal for this concept of the smart city and how to achieve that goal.
Thank you, Professor. Especially, I think you have a strong engagement with policy makings and feasibilities and the research and this kind of things. Can you explain that? What your observations about Asia Pacific markets? I think that Asia Pacific, like China, I think Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore's, Vietnam's, they have a lot of new infrastructures, and Asia Pacific has a lot of smart city projects, and they have very good economy, sustainable economy right now. What do you want to share with us based on your research and other things here?
Right. Obviously, I'm not an expert on smart city, but based on what I observe in my research, I think in the Asia Pacific and especially in countries like China, they are very good with technology and infrastructure. The technology in China and infrastructure in China, in many ways, are so much better than say like the United States. But in terms of the goal, I think a lot of the government right now they're focusing on the governance, how to manage the population, how to govern, how to control the population, instead of how to facilitate, how to promote the well-being of the population. So I think in that regard is I'm a little critical to the whether it's city mayor or the government, central government, is that they have been using this in somewhat, to me, is somewhat wrong direction. The goal is different, obviously. So they are trying to say, how do you manage the population better using the technology? And I think in the pandemic period, during this pandemic, you can see that clearly. They have been using all sorts of technology to sort of, there are some benefits in terms of mitigating, containing the pandemic. But on the other hand, there's a lot of control of the population. So,
Yes, Professor Sun, what you want to add about this Asia Pacific market?
The Asian Pacific market, I think, will have a better future when you compare to North America in particular, because in this culture, we're collectively focused. We have a collectivism oriented. So when we think about that, right now, we always talk about technology. Of course, most Asian countries, they're lagging behind North America or Europe. But we have an opportunity to leapfrog the old technology and jump into the most advanced technology. Just like Youqin said, China has much better infrastructure compared to America. You see, I already got a few interruptions today. Okay, my home internet supposed to be fast enough. Okay, but it's not interrupted. Wi-Fi doesn't work, and then I'm using my phone. The data service still does not work smoothly. So immediately last time we had a meeting, Kenny Martin could not use 4G at home. He had to go to his office for our conference. What kind of infrastructure we have? We're not talking Asian country in terms that we're more collective oriented. We're not. Indeed, we're less ideologically oriented. American, we're in ideological war, which hurts smart city initiative. We won't become smart if our leaders, our people are stupid. Engage in those ideological wars instead focus on the thing which care most people care about. You heard most people to serve the interest of a small group. I call them extremists, almost become terrorists in some sense. That's
Yes. Professor Huang, I think because of this internet, if you take more lead, because our audience actually are asking more questions on smart cities and other things. If you share your experience about this smart city things, because definitely we will explore it with different corporations and the governments, and as much as possible with our audience. So yeah, regarding this smart city things, like I think Professor San actually come up with some of the geographical issues and the social issues and international politics as well, because of the relationship in between USA and China. Can you give us some sort of explanations? Yeah.
Right. Obviously, I think I agree with Professor Sun that the technology in China, for example, in Shenzhen, which is the southern city in China, the whole city is already covered with 5G, right? And in the United States, we are, 4G and not even 4G in many places, which is kind of unfortunate because technology is there. And the politics between the United States and China is not only affecting, people in the United States in terms of the infrastructure, the technology we can access, but I think it's also affecting other countries as well, not just Asia Pacific countries, but also European countries, because the United States put a lot of pressure, right? Say you're not allowed to use Huawei technology and so on. So that's that. Secondly, I think going back to the social issue is in Asia Pacific, the government invests a lot in the infrastructure, like in China, so which is much better. That's a great thing. But on the other hand, I want to mention is that people do lose quite a bit of control in terms of their life, the privacy issue and so on. So in China, for example, the cell phone data is widely used by the government. The facial recognition technology is widely used by the government. It is convenient in some ways to the population, to the people, but I think there are a lot of issues associated with the widespread use of that kind of technology in the governance that we need to be concerned a little bit about it. I think the population in China, they know that, but somehow maybe they feel they can't really control that, or they can't really voice their objection. So they just sort of passively accept that's the fact. But I think there's a lot of issues. For example, in the United States, in many cities, they ban the use of facial recognition. But in China, it's sort of, being adopted by local governments without much debate and discussion on the implications of using that kind of technology.
Thank you, Professor San. Can you hear me? I think he's
I can
struggling
hear
with
you,
internet
but you
connection.
cannot see me. Yeah, I can hear you. No problem. I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can you share your concept about this smart city? Because for I understand that you are struggling with internet connections. So yes.
Mm-hmm.
So what do
We're
you want to
stuck
share about
in
this
policy.
smart city? Yeah, there is even a question from audience.
Okay.
But yes, we want to listen more of your concept on a smart city.
Okay. I think using both of us, if we get the third person, Yongwei got some technical issue. I don't know what kind of issue it is, and he couldn't get the system. Anyway, so in my mind, we need to move beyond the current definition of smart city, the technology. I call the modern person from industrialization based on manufacturing and then service. And now we are in a different stage in terms of whole civilization. So smart, I come up with a concept, I call it super smart in order to differentiate from the current version. Because I want to have a connection with the smart, but I want to move beyond. I call it super smart cities. The super smart, I captured them in 5S. 5S, okay. One is called smart people. 1S. Second, smart technology is called smart technology. That's what we currently talk about discussion. Third is called smart organization. As an organization, we need to be smart. And then as a society, we need to have smart institution. American Institute doesn't work now. And finally, we need to have smart orientation of culture, value. American now individualized value doesn't serve us, does not serve its own people. It hurts itself, it hurts the world. We suffer. So we can't not just focus on technology, the 5S. Again, smart technology, smart people, smart technology, smart organization, smart institute, smart value. Period. That's my version of the smart, super smart version.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. I have question from audience. Can I take these questions?
Sure.
Yes. First questions.
Sure.
Muhammad Araf Mehraz. His question is that what are the example of eco innovations that reduce environmental pollutions and the global warming process, which is very essential for sustainable cities? Yes, Professor Huang. Yeah.
Well, what specific technology? That's a good question. I am obviously I'm not an expert in the eco sort of city research, but I know in China they have been doing a lot of experiment, eco city, eco community, low carbon emission community, zero emission community, and so on. Some of them are successful, some of them are not very successful, and I think if you look at the cases, a lot of times it's not so much of the technology is not there, not available, but it's really the politics and the will. So in China, for example, Chongming Island and in near Shanghai, and there's another example in northern China near Tianjin, Taofeidian. They have all kind of served as a failed example. Main reason is the politics and the political will is not there. So I will let Professor Sun to give you the specific example of the technology involved in that.
Yes. Professor Sun, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yes. A question from audience, Mr. Araf Mehraz. What are the example of eco innovations? He wants some example as eco innovations that reduce environmental pollutions and the global warming process, which is very essential for sustainable cities.
Okay. I give you a couple of examples. One from a solar panel. We use sunlight and produce electricity and reduce the carbon emission due to the fossil and energy. The one, right? Second, now we have smart building materials. Instead of cutting down the trees, we don't cutting down the trees. We use the garbage, okay, and then produce such organic. I'm not so organic. Maybe there's some garbage, but it's environmental friendly, and then we'll reduce the use of trees. America, we use lots of time numbers to build the huge those area houses. We can use those environmental friendly and materials, taking care of the garbage, convert them into building materials, and then we can use keep the trees and suck in more carbon dioxide, reduce the global warming. Second technology, right? And then beyond that, we think about smart grid, power supply, utility companies, water, same thing. Like a garbage processing, garbage right now, we're using too many plastics. We're using too many boxes, papers, cutting down trees. Can we do something about that? Of course. Now people talking don't use plastic bags, bottles. Like a restaurant, American restaurant use so many boxes, so many plastics. Now people think, can we use some materials can be reused instead dump them and pile them up or burn them? That creates toxic, atmosphere as well as CO2s. If we can produce some dissolved, now there's some material could be dissolved and it's lifeline. You just throw it, it'll go into the nature. It comes from the nature, goes to the nature. It's caused no problem to our environment. So I just want to give time to couple of
I
examples.
Yes, Professor Huang. Yes,
Is
yes.
I
about
can add a
market
little bit.
because we're relying on market. America want it, but the American government does not provide enough support compared to many countries. So that's the point. Here you go. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Professor San, like, can you speak loudly or you use headphone because we cannot hear you clearly? I think now you are connected, even if you cannot see you, but at least you cannot, if you communicate with us properly, because our audience has huge
Yeah.
response. They have a lot of questions. Yes, yes. Professor Huang,
Uh,
I want to, yes, yes, please.
If I may, I just want to add a little bit to what Professor Sun just mentioned about solar panel, solar energy. In China, obviously, the Chinese government invested a lot into solar energy, and they become a leader in this area. And they made it so cheap, so affordable that every household can actually have a solar panel on the roof of their house, apartment, that will use for example, the heating, the water, and so on. So that reduce a lot of carbon emission, greenhouse emission as a country. And in the United States, for example, we have the technology, but the government is still subsidizing the old technology like oil instead of these renewable energy, and it's still relatively more expensive here. So not every household can afford that. So I think, again, going back to the role of the government, is very, very important in terms of promoting, investing in new energy, and also cutting the cost so it can be widely used and it will have a much larger impact than right now in the United States is sort of just pockets of places, and only the sort of the well-off can afford that. So I think that's something the Asia Pacific, other countries will should also look into it, how to really subsidize or promote investing in these renewable energy and new technology to make it so affordable for everybody to adopt it. And then you will have a large scale impact instead of just sort of an experiment in a small group of a population or small, cluster of places that can use.
Mhm. Thank you, Professor San. Especially, like COVID-19 is a challenging moment, and the next challenge may be the global warming. And for the global warming, we need to more adjust with the green technology. We have to engage with the more solar energy, wind-related energies, or nuclear power plants, and the smart city is really, really important right now. Even in Malaysia, we see we have Malaysia, Singapore, and every country, they are actually growing in a different ecosystems. But my question is that I think Onika Sham, she also asked a very interesting questions. Hi, thanks for joining these sessions. Why Copenhagen, Vancouver, Melbourne are very high ranked cities? What are the reason behind their success? Thank you.
Professor Sun, you want to go ahead to do that?
Professor Sun, can you unmute yourself, please? Yes, yes.
All right, I will take the first step. I when you say high ranked, I don't know what exactly they mean by high ranked in what regard. But I think it's, it's the first of all is the will of the people and the government. Secondly, I think they all do very well in terms of public transit. So the transportation obviously is the major sort of driving force in terms of the carbon emissions and so on. So if you can have a very sort of efficient public transit and encouraging people, for example, riding bikes and so on, that will cut carbon emission significantly. I don't know these cities that well enough to sort of say what kind of smart city sort of policies and technologies they have been using. So Professor Sun, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I do. Right now, because everybody talking about those advanced countries in North America, in Western Europe, they're becoming exemplars of smart cities, green cities, right? So Youqin mentioned they use lots of public transit, and all those cities, don't forget, all those cities are more liberal, progressive oriented. We talk about capitalism. Capitalism is not unified, defined. Actually, right now we're talking about a variety of capitalism. In the Europe, they have a tradition, which is called democratic tradition. American favored free market. The free market is for the capitalists. The democratic is more for the environmental friendly. They're thinking more progressively in terms of value. So value matters in this case. In Canada, in Copenhagen, in Europe in general, they are more progressive, environmental friendly. That's why they're more willing to adopt those smart technologies, make them friendly for users, make them more friendly towards the environment. Ultimately, they want to create a more equitable, justified society and more environmental friendly. America is for the capitalists, for the money. We care more about the money than about the people or the environment, period. Okay, that's my comments.
Yes, thank you, Professor. I want to take another questions. Like due to actually huge response of audience, they have a more interest on smart city and this kind of things. Mama Rana, hello. What's the technology dominate in the field of smart ecology sustainable development city? Actually, he also want to know that what are the technologies, because smart city concept, I know that China doing very well. China infrastructures and their One Belt One Road initiative, especially very important in Asia and Europe and other countries right now. Can you please discuss some things about Professor Huang and Professor Sun, this One Belt One Road initiative, and if you can give us some of the example of the technologies. I think already you discussed about the green technologies and the many interesting technology. China even now #1 for solar energy. Yes.
Professor Sun, do you want to do it first?
You want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
You go, ladies first.
Well, the One Belt, One Road, I know we all know it's this grand strategy President Xi raised in recent years. Really tried to sort of reorganize the trade and economic relations between China and the rest of the world, mostly Central Asia, Europe, and Africa. So I don't know. It's considered ecological. They're going to invest a lot in infrastructure and so on, and strengthen the trade relations between China and the countries along One Belt, One Road. But I'm not sure how that's related to the ecological development. The sustainability obviously is an issue they really need to consider But I don't know how local government of those countries as well as the Chinese investors are sort of placing sustainability in their strategy when they develop the infrastructure and when they develop the trade relations between
Yeah.
China and the other countries.
Mhm. Professor Sun, I think that you have a very good
Yeah.
things about this One Belt, One Road initiative. Even now, even in Asia Pacifics and Europe and other countries, we saw that it has a really, really good steps. And even in COVID periods, this One Belt, One Road initiative actually moving forward. How do you want to explain about this point? And if you discuss about these things elaborately, that our audience can understand more about this initiative.
Okay. Let me add more background to Youqin's discussion on the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road is historical. It exists from Han Dynasty and the Tang Dynasty when China was at the peak in terms of civilization. From my perspective, in the Tang Dynasty, they already create the Silk Road. We know the famous Silk Road. One is from the sea, the other one is from the land, connecting Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Europe, Middle East, Africa. That's not something new. What's new now? What's new now is during the post-colonial time, where colonial time is over. Now we call it new colonialism or post-colonial, whatever you call it. And China started this initiative. One is for its own benefit, try to export those extra manufacturing facilities, the capital. The other one is helping those countries like Africa. Okay, those have been left, forgotten by many of the advanced countries. But China does it for its own benefit with mutual benefit in consideration. But now it has been, perceived or because of propaganda from many of the developed countries, consider this such a road and build initiative is selfish. Well, everybody is selfish. Everybody do something for its own benefit. Without benefit to themselves, nobody will do it. I will not do it. Okay, you will not do it. So why we choose a double standard? We hold high standard for China. Why you use a much lower standard for yourself? That's nonsense. Okay, that's one background. Second, the Chinese Belt Road has its own ambition and also has its own problem. But the good thing is the Chinese government does recognize those problems. And many of the Western medias and talk about the corruption, collusion between the investors and the politicians. They call it colonial, okay, colonial stuff, the style. But now the Chinese government realize we should do a better job. That's why we have Youqin, she is the head of the Confucianist Institute. Try to, you know, try to export, maybe share the Chinese wisdom with the rest of the world. That's the Chinese Asian culture. It's a Chinese origin, but it's Asian culture, which is called collectively and collectivism, right? So that kind of thing is going to help those local countries, those countries alone, include or who are willing to engage in this kind of program. If you're not willing to engage, you follow the Western style individual oriented style, that's your choice. Future is not with you, but with the collective, the Asian culture. That's the second point I want to add. Third, you talk about the student, the person asked about smart technologies. I think, again, I think there are lots of smart technologies. In terms, most promising one right now is about global warming. It's about CO2. So everything related to CO2 right now, the one is reduce the consumption of the fossil oil. Anything related, from power generation, reduce the usage of the power in terms of transmission, more efficient ways, and use all kind of source of technology. The most promising one for me now, one is with the nuclear technology. The other one is with the solar. Don't forget the nuclear. So many countries are against the nuclear technologies. In this case, European countries, they're leading the force. They used to the leader in nuclear technology, but right now they're against it. That's nonsense. Okay, nuclear technology is one of the most safest technology. If you think from a human perspective, we only talk about those dramatic cases. Oh, the Russian, the Japan stuff. Yes, those create the dramatic impact and make them look environmental unfriendly, people unfriendly. But actually, if you talk about the fossil, are they friendly? How many people they have killed? How many have been affected by the CO2 and CO1 and all those toxic gases? So thinking broadly, don't use the dramatic news to manipulate people's minds. We really need to be smart people. We need to have wisdom. Otherwise, we're fooled by the capitalists behind those propaganda. Period.
Thank you, Professor Sun. I want to move with some other things, like example, even in One Belt One Road initiative moving very fast. On the other hand, few countries like Sri Lanka, like Pakistan's, they have different story after engage with this One Belt One Road initiative. Can you explain these things? And most important thing is that how different developing nations they can do more developments and do more work on policy and these kind of things, how they can create more good policy for developing this kind of strategy or engage with this kind of good initiative. What your opinion?
Ladies first.
Um, well, this is Professor Sun's area in terms of the economy. Mine is my research is focused more on the social area. I think I've read quite a little bit about the Belt and Road Initiative and all the criticism on this initiative and how. Sort of the Chinese government is using money, right, to buy basically the cooperation of these countries and so on. But I think a lot of research has done is a lot of times the outcome of whether an infrastructure, a port or a railway is being built or not, a lot of times it really depends on domestic politics within that specific country, and it has nothing to do with China. So I think yes, it's a Chinese investment, there's a Chinese help, technology and so on, but a lot of times we really need to focus on the local context, the politics within that city, that country, and that really determines the fate of whatever the initiative, whether it's building the infrastructure or setting up a development zone in that specific country. So I just want to bring that out. It's the local context, local politics that's often more important than what China does. Secondly, I think there's another issue need to consider, which is related to the sustainability and the equity and all those social aspects, is that there are, the Chinese money coming, and in terms of the impact on different groups of population within that country, that city, I think the Chinese investors and the Chinese government do need to consider that kind of social dimension, the inclusion, the equitable growth. Need to sort of bring, especially obviously the poor people, to the sort of a same level as the elite. Consider a little more of that. So I think those two areas we need to consider when we think of One Belt, One Road initiative and whether they are successful or not.
Yes, Professor Sun.
Yeah, I agree completely with Youqin said. And with that, I just want to add a few more comments on that, not necessarily my own unique something, okay? I think that's very important to think when every country, every organization, every person, when you do something, try to do something, don't blame others. We don't blame others. We need to take a responsibility for our own actions. Ultimately, what you do what you do, we do, will determine what the benefits or the sufferings we're going to have. Don't blame others. Don't blame China. Don't blame America. Don't blame capitalists. We are the ones who can control our own fate, our own destiny. If we don't clean up our own backyard, if we are willing to be manipulated, following those propagandas, ultimately we are the ones who are going to suffer. So for those countries who are engaged in the Belt and Road Initiative, you need to clean up your backyard first. Your people need education. We need to put more money into education. Don't let the politician, don't let the media to manipulate you. We need to be educated. We need to be civilized. So those is one thing. Second, don't believe only those news medias from the advanced countries, so-called free democratic countries, they're the only source reliable. I don't think so. Too many fake news, too many biased reporters. They're biased. They're not working for you. You never know who they're working for. Maybe they're working for the newspaper. Maybe they're working for some capitalists. Maybe they're working for some politicians. Everybody has his own choice. We are the people. We serve our self-interest. So we need to think ourselves. Don't be fooled by those nonsense news reporters and the news reports. We need to be smart.
Thank you.
Education.
Thank you. Yes.
Education is a fundamental.
Yes. Exactly. Excellent point. Actually, you come up with the thought based on the education. So, Professor Huang and San, both of you are actually working as a professor for your universities and famous American universities. So, what do you want to add? How we can improve our education system? Because World Talent Economy Forum, we are highly engaged with different developing nations. South Asia, Asia Pacific, Middle East, even African markets, even Europe and North America, but we South America even. But we do want to know that how we can do more work on educations, how we can give more support to develop this education system, even especially in the COVID periods. I think that many countries actually struggling with these education systems because everybody is not prepared with these situations and the online education systems and other things. But we are trying as much as possible, World Talent Economy Forum, because what you are discussing today, you give your time and your knowledge and time, everything free, and as much as possible we will provide it to different developing nations community. What do you want to add for this education systems and the education policy and better educations things? Yeah.
Well, I will start first. I think first of all, obviously, the government really needs to invest in education, invest in educational infrastructure, provide opportunities to the people, especially the poor. And this is not just a problem in Asia, in South America, Latin America. This is a problem in the United States too. In this pandemic, for example, with teaching all going virtual online, and there's so many trouble, difficulties for people in the United States, in the cities, that from the poor neighborhood, they cannot access online education. So the local schools and local government, they have to come up with a lot of creative ways to allow these students to access online lessons. And I would assume that's the same in Asia, in other developing countries as well. Not only the people in the rural areas, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the access to the high speed internet, but within the cities, I would think a lot of population, a lot of neighborhoods, they don't have access to a high speed internet, allow them to continue online education. So I think that's really one thing that the government really should emphasize education and invest big into the education. And then also there's inequality, in education as well. I'm sure in Malaysia and any country, there are best schools in the world that people can attend to. But then also there are kids that don't have access to just regular basic education. So that's really, where you invest your money, or which segment of the population you invest into. And obviously, to me, the answer is clear. You really need to invest in the population at the lower end of the hierarchy. I would think migrants in the cities. In Malaysia, just like in China and in many developing countries, there are so many migrants coming from the villages going to the cities to pursue a better life. But often, they end up in the poorest neighborhood, the worst situation in the cities. So I think we really need to invest in these new citizens, new urban citizens, and invest in their education, allow their children to go to a good school. And of course, there are poor people in the existing population, urban population as well. So I think the government needs to really invest big in education, but it's not in the private schools for the elite to go to. It really should be the education for the poor people, so that they are educated, they have access to the information from multiple sources, and so on, so that we can avoid all the problems Professor Sun mentioned earlier.
Yes, Professor Sun. Beside that, this is smart city. When we go for intellectual discussions with India and other Bangladesh, Pakistans, and now they are thinking about smart village, because many of their populations from city, they are moving to the village. So now India, Bangladesh, even this kind of country, they are more thinking about how they can grow smart village. Because actually they're highly density populated country, and when people go back to the village, they have to create something for their employment. So what your concept? Actually we have more audience response with your permissions, and we have to extend this session because there are huge audience response. They have many questions. They want to know more from you. So Professor Sun, about this smart village concept.
Okay, so we're talking about when we talk about the future society, and we literally divide into urban with rural. But in human life, we're moving around. Some people choose to in the countryside. Some people choose to live in the cities. Ultimately, rules the countryside need to be integrated with the urban. We used to think rural as some rustic, some backward places, but with the 5G technologies, we think geography matters less. There is no question, no doubt about that. As you mentioned, many people now they're moving away from big cities. Why? People finally realize that there is some negative externalities, we call externalities, associated with the benefits inherited in the big cities. The current one, particularly in developing countries, many cities we call them over urbanization, very crowded, unhealthy compared to the countryside life. It's really horrible, particularly during the current pandemic. People realize it's not healthy. I cannot even live. I may lose my life. I may lose my family. People finally realize there is some beautiful things associated with the small village type of lifestyle. The small village, again, from a historic perspective, is a dominate the human being's life. Urbanization is only recent thing associated with the modern society. But during this post-pandemic, post-modern world, particularly during the post-pandemic era, people are rethinking, people are reflecting on those choice of lifestyle. Is this a good one for me? Is this a good one for my family? Even from the society perspective. Excuse me. So, coming back to the Asian contact. I think because most countries don't have that kind of high level of urbanization. We're not at 80%. It's not a Singapore city state. Most countries 40, 50, maybe less. China just over 55, around 50 and 55, 60%. Now people are moving back. It's a good thing. I like it. Small is beautiful. Big is horrible. Big cities, they're monsters like Los Angeles, like Shanghai, like Beijing. They're monsters. They're not good. Maybe economically, from the economic perspective, from technology perspective, they can create lots of new ideas, new technologies, smart technology, but from us, it's not good. So people find it. Maybe I can choose a compromise, middle road. Meanwhile, I can enjoy a healthy, environmental friendly, close to the nature life. On the other hand, I can still do some innovative work like Youqin, and he's living in Albany, is a small city. In Chinese stand, in Asian stand, it's a small city. It's much more livable. It's much more friendly. It's much less stressful. So why not? And she's doing great research. Me in the big city, Los Angeles. If I choose to work at a UCLA, it takes me about 2 hours, one way commuting. Two-way 4 hours will be wasted on the road. Psychologically, physically, environmentally, the nobody is good. We only try to make a living. So how to make a living is your choice. It's a personal choice. Now I think people are making the smart decision by going back to village. On the one hand, to engage them, engage the backward part into the modern technology, modern lifestyle. On the other hand, they are benefiting from that kind of movement. So I think it's a good thing. If we can integrate the new technology into the countryside, what a beautiful world. Why reject that kind of future? No reason. So we're doing the right thing in Asia.
Yes,
Can
Professor Huang.
yeah, I just want to add a comment. I don't. I think yes, I agree with Professor Sun that there are a lot of problems associated with big city living. But I don't think we want to romanticize country living, especially for developing countries like Malaysia, like China. Cities still offer much better infrastructure, public services, and welfare benefits than the villages. People are still moving away from villages to go into cities to look for opportunities to improve the standard of living and so on. So yes, there are all these problems associated with big cities, but I think in developing countries, unless the government invests heavily into the rural areas, so in the village, we have access to a good school, you have access to a good hospital, you have a library, you have all those amenities available to the people, then still city will remain attractive to migrants. That's why in China, 100, 200, over 200 millions of migrants, they're leaving villages trying to go to cities, even though they may be discriminated in cities. They may not find the best jobs in cities. They may live in horrible living conditions in cities. I'm sure it's the same in Malaysia and other developing countries. But cities remain the sort of magnet for people in the countryside. They still offer more job opportunities and welfare benefits, infrastructures than in the villages. So I think we don't want to romanticize rural living. That's possible in developed nations where the infrastructure, the services are much better in the countryside than in developing countries. So I think it's really, in order to enjoy the country life, in order to go back to the smaller places, the government really have to invest a tremendous amount of money in the countryside to make that true. And I think there's quite a long way in developing countries to reach that stage. Because right now, even the cities, we're still lacking a lot of things. So I just want to
Yes.
add to that.
Yes, yes. Professor San, can you hear me? I want to take audience questions. Noor
Yes, I can.
Fazrin. Yes, Noor Fazrin, greetings from Malaysia. It is an interesting topic and the discussion is going well. I just want to know what the criteria should fulfill to become a most livable city. Thank you.
Wow, that's
Professor San.
Youqin's topic. That's not mine. Youqin, you go. Me?
Okay.
Okay.
Uh, well, I
I
don't
think,
have a
yeah.
specific, but sort of criteria, but I think it will be a long list. You can go from environment to the income to public services to infrastructure, and to the areas like I'm more concerned about is inclusion and equity and so on. So you can go really a long list in terms of what's most livable city. I think a lot of people probably will focus on, say, environmental aspect, right? Does they offer clean air, clean environment? That's one. The relate to what Sun mentioned earlier is everything accessible? Is commuting manageable, right? If you have to spend 2 hours one way to go to work and then another 2 hours to come home every day, 4 hours on the road with all that pollution and noises on the road, that's not very livable, right? So the commuting infrastructure is another thing. But I think the sort of political environment in the city is another thing to measure whether it's livable or not. If this is a not very inclusive city. If I come to the city, I'm treated as second class in the city, just like a lot of cities, even treating their own migrants, right? People from the villages, for example, in China, they're kind of treated as second class because of their status. Because of their migrant status, they are not treated as legal, official urban residents. So they cannot access a lot of the benefits the urban residents sort of enjoy. And if that's the case, I wouldn't think it's a livable city either.
Mhm. Professor San.
Yeah. Something.
Professor to
Yeah.
move the outdoor
So,
from indoor to
can you hear
outdoor
me?
now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, now because I want to enjoy environment friendly the environment. If why not
Yes.
taking advantage of what's offered here in the backyard instead of in the in the kitchen. Okay. Um, I think Youqin mentioned everything. It's going to livable city. Ultimately, it's context dependent. It's context dependent because different cultures they see what is livable differently. America has one view, or maybe America already have multiple views of what's livable because we're the melting pot, have so many ethnicities. But in terms of each city, don't ask me, ask yourself. Have an engaged conversation, discussion among the citizens, political leaders, business, and civilian leadership. Have a deep engage conversation, informed conversation. Make everybody's voice heard. What do you want? What do you think is a livable city? Don't ask me. Don't ask Americans. Don't ask Youqin. We know nothing. Maybe we just read some news report. Maybe we read some article from, but we don't really understand you. You understand yourself much better than anybody else. So put that into context. I just want to add that background. Everything Youqin said is right. We need to think lots of aspects. But ultimately, what is considered livable for that criteria is depending on your own culture, your own value. Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by any other people's opinion. Only those opinions can only be provided as a suggestion, not as the ultimate decision. You need to make an informed decision based on your understanding. What's best for you? period.
So I
Yes.
think I just want to add to that, as Professor Sun just mentioned, is in terms of defining what's livable and as a goal for the city to achieve, you really need to hear from the people living in that city. But as I said, I don't want to give you the specific criteria, but a lot of scholars do research. They come up with a long list of the criteria. But I think in general, you can look at it from environmental aspect.
Yeah, it's a
You
laundry
can
list.
look at the economic aspect, whether there are job opportunities, income, affordability, and then the social aspect, right? So what I mentioned earlier. So if you go from those areas, I think for the local government, for example, they want to make the city more livable. They can look at all those areas, how to improve, and then incorporate local populations, citizens, the voice in building that list of the criteria.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I want to add more question. Muhammad Shainul Islam. His question is that, hello, sir. It's a very nice discussion for smart cities. What are the main determinants of the development of renewable energy sources?
What's the most important determining factor? You want to talk
Yes.
most important? Wow. Whenever I
Yeah.
want to someone ask something most, I'm scared to answer those kind of questions
Okay.
because things are so complicated. It's a system. That's why in the previous discussion, I think human beings need to have three types of thinking skills. One is called systematic thinking. The second is called dialectical thinking. The third is called critical thinking. So if we put those three types of thinking skill into perspective, into working on these issues on smarter, most important, what are the important things? They're not single issued because they're so intertwined together. If you just pick up one issue, forgetting the other issue, you're not going to create a sustainable, livable environment, a super smart version of the city. If you must consider all those issues systematically without forgetting, overlooking other things. Let's say I just smart technology, smart transportation. Let's say become my mayors. If I'm going to choose become the mayor, campaign for the mayor, I want to make the smart transportation my priority. But you forgot who is using this technology. Let's say I'm Los Angeles. We're going to promote something, flying taxi in 3 years. You're kidding me. Who is using that tower? How many people are going to benefit from that technology? Only the billionaires, millionaires. Average people will pay the tax. And to benefit those rich guys, that's not called smart in my definition. So don't ask me what's most important, what's the least important. Most important, if I have to say, is education. Be educated forward by nonsense talks. Be smart people. Education, education, education. With geography, say location, location. I say education, education, education. Period. That's the most important thing.
Yes. Professor Huang. Yeah.
I agree with the importance of education, but I would add that a political will is very, very important. Just comparing the case of China and the United States. So it's not the lack of technology. It's really the lack of political will in terms of where the money should go and which sector you are going to promote, which technology we are going to support. So I think in China, there is a political will in recent years. They invested heavily in renewable energy and technology. And that's why you see the renewable energy and the technology develop rapidly in China. While in the United States, in comparison, we have the technology, but I think the politicians are still influenced by the big money. They are still supporting the old technology, like the oil industry and so on, instead of providing subsidies to solar companies. So this is why you don't see the United States is leading in renewable energy and technology. So I agree there are lots of different factors. People's demand can be another thing, but I think a political will is very, very important.
Beside that, I want to add something because, example, yes, I know that Chinese economy is heavily involved with these governments, and the government has very influence over that. But other countries, even South Asia's and other developing nations, like corporate also play very good roles. Example, if you focus on Indian economy like different kind of private corporations. I think Tata is a big influential corporations in India. Even different private corporations, they are playing in a very good role. In example, in Bangladesh, Beximco playing a very good role. Summit United Groups playing a very good roles. So what will be the corporate responsibilities? Because example, every different country has different cultures, especially when we focus on the smart city issues, and corporate are playing very good roles. Government also involved, but I think because of the mixed economy, there are different approach we can think. If you guide them, the corporation, how should they play a role for developing this kind of interesting projects?
Okay, let me jump in here. I don't want to only
Professor San, Professor San,
yes. Can you hear me?
uh, can you speak loudly,
Can you hear
please?
me?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Audience want
I'm
more of your
I'm
loud
already
voice,
speaking in
because
full
when you
voice.
come, audience has huge questions.
Uh, because I'm talking for energy now. I cannot shout. I
Okay.
already almost shouting. That's American technology. It doesn't work. I'm fine. So anyway, I think in this case, you're talking about the business rule in this smart technology. I want to make one statement here. We are all human beings have been educated in the wrong way. Say anything related to government is wrong. Say it again. Anything related to government is wrong. Government is wrong. Government has no rules in promoting technology or in development. Business, we are the job creators. We are the technology builders. Government, get out of here. That just put the government under the gun. You get out of business. Is that right thinking? Nonsense. Government has always important in any country, including in the United States of America. Without government, America would be die. Millions of people would die. Because those are not the business private interests. They never think about that. Without a government, they won't have the medical protection equipment. Without the mask, of course, also because the government, we got into such a huge problem. So government is a double edged, just like the business. If you work for the people, you help people. If you work for yourself, you hurt the people. So any organization, players, don't have a blank statement. Certain type of players, they're good. Certain type of player organized, they're bad. State-owned enterprise, they're not born bad. Just like the private, they're not born good. Everybody, every type of organization has two aspects, positive versus negative. Don't listen to those junk economics. Don't listen to Adam Smith. Don't listen to the liberalism, which equal the market modern economy with free market, no government interaction. Hong Kong, that's a best example. Without a government, it got into problem. Exactly because of the government, they got into problem. Because of they clean up the government, clean up the. So everything has two, as it's called dialectic thinking. I don't want to remind everybody. Everything has two, me or you. We have positive aspect, we have negative. So don't think every word I said is correct. I may be junk person. Just put it on the face because we're right live speaking. I need to be politically correct, but in my heart, I did not think so. So thinking critically, systematically, and dialectically, and then let those thinking to guide your life. Nobody else. The government, social responsibility, companies. You have to think about a society. Without the government, without the people's support, you're going to make nothing. Tesla, Elon Musk. without American technology, other people federal research on, you're not going to create the electric cars. You're not going to create a space shuttle. Intel, without the federal money into the Bell lab, you're not going to create the current Intel. Apple, without the government supporting research, you're not going to create the smartphone you like. Microsoft, same thing. Without government support in education, you're not going to get the software engineers. You're not going to get managers. So government is everywhere. We cannot deny government doing anything. Whenever you need me, yeah, government, help me, bail me out. When I don't need you, it's none of your business. You have nothing to do with it. What kind of thinking is that? It's called ridiculous, selfish, too money-oriented bullshit talk. That's the end of my talk.
Yes. Professor Huang.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Sheriff, saying the corporations can play a very important role in that. And when I say the importance, when I say political will is very important, I don't mean just the government go ahead and do everything. You know, when you have the political will, the government can incentivize corporations to do the things we want them to do. Because for corporations, companies are making profit. That's the ultimate goal for them, right? So the government can once we have the direction, have the will to do, say, we want to invest in renewable energy, new energy, you can use policy to guide these corporations to go to the way you want them to go, to let them to play a major role in the renewable energy technology you want them to involve in. So, as Professor Sun says, all the corporations, they sort of receive some sort of policy incentives or financial subsidies from the government. So to me, same thing. It's ultimately what the government wants to do, what kind of a political will you have, which industry you want to support. For example, in the United States, is right now the subsidy still goes more towards the oil industry instead of the solar industry. But that can be changed if there is a political will to move towards renewable energy. So I think that can be done in China, that can be done in Malaysia, India, and so on. So really let the corporation, let the market play a role, but those need to be shaped by with the political will, with the government policies in order to go to the right direction.
Thank you. I want to take two more questions. Araf Mehraz, his question is that, are there any policies for assessing sustainability in urban employment? And another questions I want to take from Hosne Arafet, though she said it's a great discussion for future cities. Sir, what is the difference between indicator and criteria in urban planning? Thank you.
Wow, you're talking. I'm not urban planner. I'm just an urban ecologist, and Youqin is the scholar of urban government. Maybe you can talk about politics. But in my thinking, I think criteria most often is very specific and define. Say, hey, 5%. Maybe just a variable. It's just a direct point, certain direction. It's indicate something. It does not show the exact specific thing. So that's my. So criteria is more specific, indicating just a very general term, indicating something. That's my of the usually. Youqin, you want to add to that?
Well, I'm not sure I actually understand the question, what's the indicator and criteria of the urban planning? And I think what we need to do in the planning community is really to have a goal. What kind of cities you want to plan, you want to build, right? So if you have a sustainability, you have inclusion, you have equitable city as your goal, then those will be the guidelines for what kind of planning you're going to design and implement, whether it's for the infrastructure, for the education, for the transportation infrastructure, for the education infrastructure, for the housing development, and so on. So you will have those as your ultimate goal, and then come up with the strategies to realize those goals. And of course, later you can measure whether you achieved your goal or not. So you can have a kind of evaluation system in place for that.
Yes. Professor Sun, regarding this policy for assessing sustainability in urban employment, do you have any idea about the human resource policy for creating more employments? Yes, I know that at present situations, even if you have any idea how we can solve more these unemployment issues, even Professor Huang's and Professor Sun, I think that this is one of the major challenges right now. I
Yeah.
think different countries, yes.
Uh, I think in order to come up with the right policy, you need to have the right people. People, right people. You need to get the right people into discussion. You need to make sure people are willing to engage in the conversation. If they're not willing to listen to each other, they only want to fight against each other. Zero sum game is not the game way, the right way to do the game. The right way to do the policy is to have dialogue, communication, communication, right? You need to have trust. If you have that kind of negative opinion, negative attitude towards other side, you say, I want to take them all, winner take them all. You're not going to create good policy for the city. So we need to have the right people with the right attitude and right institution. Ultimately, it depends on you and me individual. America now, we're election. We're choosing the president. We're choosing the mayors. We're choosing the senators. So vote for democratic countries. Vote. Use your vote. Choose the right people at the right position to do the right thing for you and me, for us, not for you, not just for me, for you and for us. And for Asian countries like China, certain countries don't have the democratic process. That does not mean people's voice cannot be heard. That does not mean the government can do anything they want. Those people say presidency can do anything. That's nonsense. Presidency is concerned by its own institution. Okay? He cannot say, I want to invade America. I want to beat America. No, no way. People say, no, wait a second, President. You need to consider this, consider that. There is a democratic process. It's just a different form of democracy. It's just a way of governance. We don't just say, picture somebody else as evil. You are the genius. Are you genius? Is Trump the genius smart person? Is America the best system we have? It sucks now. So never think down upon on others. Never look down upon others. Never look down upon on yourself. We are equal in front of God. Or in China, we don't believe in God. Many people don't believe in God. In front of the heaven, we are equal. We are equal. We people first. Use your wisdom to do the right thing for you, for your family, for the society. Adhere to that kind of principle. I don't think we're going to have any problem. The only problem we have is we only think about me or I. We never think about you or us. Use your
Mhm,
vote. Use your
mhm,
thinking. If you're a teacher, educate your students. Do the right thing. If you're a citizen, do the right thing as an individual towards a family, towards a community. A politician, do the right thing not just for your interest group who support you, provide the campaign money, donations. Work for the whole, not just for fraction of the population. Yes.
Yes, Professor Huang.
I just want to add a little bit, specifically to the question on urban employment sustainability. I think, you can come up with many measures. One thing I would think about is to have the lowest unemployment rate. Anybody who wants to work, they can find a job. If you can achieve that, that is considered as sustainable. And the other aspect is people are making livable wages. It is very common in both developed and developing countries. People are employed, they are working for multiple jobs, but still they are not making enough money to have a decent living. So the wage level, a livable sort of wage level is another measure you can consider. If everybody wants a job, can have a job, everybody's working, they can live a decent life. And I would consider that sort of consider the employment, sustainable. If every city, every country can achieve that, I think the government has done a great job. So the government is obviously very, very important, going back to what Professor Sun just mentioned, who's in office, who's in charge, what kind of policy they come up with for the population is very, very important. But I think unemployment rate, wage level, those are the two key sort of measures that we can use to look at whether it's sustainable or not in terms of employment.
Yes, thank you. Actually, there is a huge audience questions. I want to take just few questions, then we will go for the sum up for today's sessions. I know that it's very hard for you because all of you are from USA. Time zones and difference is a very problem for you. Mohammed Shumon, he asked you a question. Hello, sir. What's your opinion on increasing rate of slums due to rapid urbanizations? Uh, Mohammad Shohel Rana, his question is, would you tell us what is the role of cultural parameter in sustainable city planning? And Shahinul Islam, how to evaluate an early 21st century cities from a sustainable perspective? So I think it's all about the sustainable perspective. I think already you discuss elaborate like in different way of sustainability, but I think for better understanding, if you give them some examples, what the sustainability means in terms of educations, health, energy, smart cities, I think it will be more helpful for our audience today. Professor Sun.
Yeah, can you put the questions again? I did not quite understand the questions. So you have the one, give one question. Early 21st century from a sustainable perspective. Okay. Okay, let me say that. Ask yourself in terms of human, as an individual, as a group, what do you want? Just just make a list. For me, and according to famous social scientist, and Maslow, he talked about human need, 5 levels. The bottom is about your daily life, and then security, and then it's about self-fulfillment, right? So for any sustainable, you have to cover all those with all. So if you're poor city, maybe just cover the basic. That's called sustainable. If you have more money, have more resources, you make sure everybody fulfilled in their lifetime. I want to be the president of America. I want to be the president to control the whole world. If you have that kind of ambition, congratulations. It's a wishful thinking. So it's a demand. Ultimately, it's a context. You ask yourself. Okay. Again, I can emphasize context very much, just like Youqin emphasized. Okay. And so, what is a livable city? For a couple of things. One is education. You have people educated, get the right education for the system. You don't want over-educated people. You don't want under-educated people because we can only provide so much resources for education. You don't want to spend all the money to the education because you're going to sacrifice the job, right? Investment in other infrastructure, education. Second, health. Make sure everybody have a basic coverage of health insurance, Medicare. Have at least we can live up to the expectancy. We don't want to die earlier than that. Every country has a different. We want to elevate that expectancy for human as a whole, for every citizen. But we can only do so much. Be reasonable. You don't want the government to cover everything. You need to chip in. On the other hand, we have to do something about it. Provide health care, provide the service, affordable price, equitable terms. Third, we need to make people happy. How to happy? We need to get people engaged in social service, have jobs. With a job, I can, without talking to my friends. So social media should be something to be promoted. Okay? Of course, social can be manipulated in the other things, like American Facebook was used to attack certain people, benefit certain people. That's it depends on the government. You do the regulation. Citizens, you do the right thing, right? And then you need to make sure you're not just you happy. How to happy? Well, talk to people, live a healthy life, and then you should be able to travel, right? And they have access to the medicines you need. Right now, the biotech is booming. Lots of technology. We spend lots of money. But are they benefiting us? I don't know. I don't see anything. I only see those capitalists making tons of money out of IPO, right? So lots of technology out there. I just want to give you one example, which combine the 5G and the health. Right now, there is a company, the technology used to develop by Bell Labs. We know the Bell Labs. They develop very thin chip. It's a health chip. For some people who are interested, go to my Facebook, health chip. It's a very small, teeny thing. It can help you regulate the heart, regulate if the lady be like a diet, lose weight, they help you do that. If you have diabetes, they help you do that. It's not medicine. It's like electronic, a very small device, like a piece of paper, decorative. You can go to my Facebook, there's product. There's lots of things happening. People like to, but now we're locked in our backyard. I can only stay in this period. Eugene can only walk from his her campus to home. We're locked. We cannot travel. Travel is our part of that. We use so many Expedia. We use so many of those travels. Now airplanes are done. Airlines are done. Travel. Talk to your friends. That's the third part. And then finally, our government need to provide good service. We don't want to apply, go to the government office multiple times to just get one license. Luckily, not better. We'll use electronic services. So ask yourself, based on new technology, how we can benefit, how we can create new reality. Futuristic can become real. Because if we have the right leader, right people, right organization, right value, we can make sure those can create jobs that can make us happy, have an equitable, justifiable, and environmental friendly, have a living, have a basic income elevated without few, the top 1%, 3% take all. That's my comments on that. Youqin, you have lots of more.
Well, there are quite a few questions. I don't know where to start. Good questions. So I guess I can say a few words about, there's one question about the slums, because that is related to my research on housing. And I think, yes, you're right. In developing countries like China, like Malaysia, India, Indonesia, we're still in the process of urbanization. People are still going to cities for a better life, for better opportunities. So there's a rapid urbanization going on. And of course, it's a challenge for the municipal government, for the city to accommodate the large influx of migrants. And providing housing, decent housing, is a huge challenge. I'm sure it's in Malaysia, in India, in China, in all these developing countries. And of course, more often than not, is the government cannot provide decent housing to this influx of migrants, and they have to come up with their own way of providing shelter for themselves. So that's where you will see the emergence of slums in major cities in developing countries. Obviously, you can't really depend on developers to provide, affordable housing to these poor migrants. They probably will go into the high-end market, right? Build villas, high-end condominiums for the rich. Again, here I would argue for the role of the government, not only by providing housing directly to the poor people, to migrants in the cities, but also mobilize developers, mobilize the market forces to provide affordable, decent housing to the new citizens coming into the city. It is probably hard to get rid of the slums in these cities at this stage of urbanization, but the hope is we can reduce the numbers and the scale of slums and provide housing to these new migrants coming to the city. And I think by doing so, we are one step closer to a sustainable city, in terms of the inclusion, in terms of the well-being of the population. As I mentioned very early on, that really the well-being of the population is the ultimate goal for a smart city, right? If you have all the fancy technology, but only few people are using it, or they are using it in such a way that to suppress the population, people are not benefiting from it. They are not living a better life from it. Then what's the point? So to me, that's not a smart city. So again, going back to the slum, I think when people can have decent, affordable housing to live in, that's one step closer to a smart city and a sustainable city.
Yes, thank you. There is actually huge audience questions response, and they come up with the idea of artificial intelligence. How can artificial intelligence can make our cities more competitive? Hosnara Firdos, what are the current example of smart cities? Araf Mehraz, is it possible to slow down the global warming process in the 21st century? Yes, if you add something in this particular point.
I would go to the last question first, and then Professor Huang can come in. I think it's possible. You cannot say, okay, this is that we can't do anything about it. I think it's possible, and we have to do something. We have to make it possible. And I think if you go back to China, look at the Chinese case. A few years ago, China, the air pollution in China was terrible. You have those, like in big cities like Beijing, they have those smog days last for, weeks. And I think that's around 2013, 2014, something like that. And after that, the government realized this is not just sort of, for a certain population. Everybody lives in this polluted air, right? Including the leadership, including the rich people. So they really come up with, have a strong will to say, all right, we have to do something. And this is also going to threaten the economic growth, which the government, sort of focus on very much. So they put in a lot of measures. They shut down a lot of coal burning factories. They relocated the factories out of the cities to the countryside. They forced them to implement all these technologies to cut down emissions and so on. And I think if you go back to cities, Chinese cities now, they are so much better than, say, 5-6 years ago in terms of the number of days they have blue skies, or number of days they smog they have. They still have occasionally, but so much better than a few years ago. So if China can do it, India can do it, Malaysia can do it. And of course, we also see this happen in the United States, which is a few decades earlier. Also, pollution was a huge problem in London, but they did it. So I think the political will, you may feel I repeat certain items again and again, but I think if we have the political will, if the people have the will to force their government to take action towards certain direction, I think it's possible. So don't give up on that. Yeah, but everybody should play our role. In addition to recycle, at the individual level, but we really need to force the government, voice our concerns, force the government to take action. And when the government takes action, when the government mobilizes the corporations, and we all do this together, it's possible. And it shouldn't last that long to see the effect either, too. Go ahead, Mr. Professor Sun.
Yes, we can. It's Obama's slogan. Yes, we can. Nothing is impossible, right? And that's the right attitude. But in order to make that happen, attitude is not enough. We need to have actions. That's why I have been putting together something called a 3A framework to frame my research. It's called agency, actors, and the actions. We can, based on that, I call it the people's turn. We need to trust people more. We need to think about more about the people, about the leaderships, how to make them accountable, how to choose right people into those positions, not just the leaders, also about the civilian servants. Right now, the process is corrupted anywhere. Those people who have connection with the key players, they got the position. People who are qualified, competent, they're disqualified by the so-called institutionalized process, interview, job nonsense. Many people got the job not because they're competent, but because their 关系 or network, who they know, who they're loyal to. That's how we got us into such a mess. We, as a people, as a citizen, we should be able to clean up the mess we created, because we trust those propagandas. We're too stupid. We need to be smart. Don't be fooled by the politician's slogan, I work for you. No, you don't. You work for yourself and a small fraction of those people, elite groups. Listen carefully. Read between the lines. What exactly they want to say. What exactly they want to do. Not what they say. Ultimately, is what they do that matter to us all. Without thinking deeply, just reading their campaign slogan on those television, the social media, that's really going to hurt you and me. We are the ones who pay for those kind of stupidity for us we own. We must be educated, intelligent, smart enough to tell the difference between smart and stupid. If we're willing to be stupid, and you deserve whatever we get from the current system, don't blame ourselves. We are the ones who created the problem to begin with. Why we blame others? What kind of attitude is that? What kind of value is that? From the present down to the bottom, to the street, go back to your country, go back to your shit country. What kind of attitude is that? Is that American? Is that something called universal value? Democracy, human rights? Rule by law? Nothing is working here. Don't be fooled by the politicians, by the nonsense propaganda. Ask yourself, is the right thing from your own human perspective? Ultimately, everybody's just a human being, nothing more. No matter who you are, no matter your president, no matter your senator, you're just like me, average citizen. When we die, everybody goes back to nature, become atoms, nothing more. We're the same, right? So why you create such a nonsense talk? So polarized society is not going to help anybody. We must be willing to listen to each other, sit down peacefully, not just argue against each other. I want to kill you. You want to kill me, and then I want to kill you. It's a revenge That's toxicating environment. Not going to help anybody. So Asian countries, we don't do that. We don't have. But unfortunately, there's certain group of people. They try to adopt American value, listen to the system, use the bullshit argument to fight against each other. I'm not going to point the name, but you know who I'm talking to. Sit down. Sit down. Solve your own problem. Don't blame us. Don't listen to Trump. He's trying to blame any other. He's taking no responsibility as the president of the United States, the most powerful country in the whole world. He's going to blame. Are you going to do the same thing, certain countries and leaders? Don't blame China. Don't blame America. Blame yourself. You are the own. You own your own problem. So your people. Don't say it's product of China. You're talking about the doctors and nurses who got the training from China. You say you don't want them to help your people? Nonsense. Here, you know who I'm talking to. Okay?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Professor. I want to take the last question from audience. What type of environment-friendly investment project can generate an improvement in economic growth?
Wow. That's a hard question. Usually I'm going to take a hard one. You follow my lead, okay? And then you can think. I let you give you more time to think about it. What kind of technology which can create jobs while maintain the environment friendly? Lots of things. For example, right now we cut down the trees, we build the house. The property, the housing is a fixed thing in America. Right? Without the property market, American economy is going to hell. So can we create jobs, new technology, which can help the economy? Yes. Green building material. Asking our sister, and she's not here. Her name is Yu Zhou. She's a professor at Western College, and she studied the green building stuff. If we can take the garbage, make them into building green materials, and reduce the trees, we help people. Well, we create a new job, very competitive. It's a new technology. You're gonna lead the can, and so you have the first move advantage. That's just one example, right? Like Elon Musk, he's doing the right thing to some extent, but not to some extreme. He's doing the battery technology so good, but only thing is he's overdoing it. Okay, he's overdoing it right now because he just. I was reading a report. Everything was running in a rush. Like the other day, there was electric car. The top, whoops! When the guy was driving like at 120 miles an hour, the roof flew away. That shows your quality control is a problem. Okay, he tried to make money. You use all those kind of new technology, automation to make money, right? So if you really for the people, you need to make sure those technologies are safe. Don't have a burn. Yeah, still relatively safe compared to the car accidents, right? So those AI can be used if you develop the right algorithm, come up with the right app, help people find the right doctor to diagnose your problem earlier instead of go to the hospital, see the doctor. Now we don't want to go to the hospital just in case I got the effect by coronavirus and they die next day or week or in 2 weeks. I don't want to go to the hospital. So you can have the remote technology. Everything taken creatively. Everything is possible. The only thing that's impossible, make things impossible, is our own closed thinking. If you have the imagination, you don't have the wisdom, knowledge, of thinking imaginatively about the future. And then that's the only thing that will prevent you to achieve that ultimate goal. So think everything, everywhere, like in the backyard. Okay, you can have robotics do the thing for you. I can sit here talking endlessly about the nonsense I'm talking to you. We can have the robotics doing all the job for us. But are they going to help us? I don't know. Because the capitalists, I'm going to make the money, make them expensive, only available to those rich guys. I'm not going to make it available to me or you because we cannot afford them. But technology is there. Can we make them, those robotics available to us? Do the homework for me so I don't need to cook every day for my kids and my wife? You're right? So you don't need to do the housework, those the small things that the chores at home. You can let the robot, hey, cook for me, serve me well, bring the tea, those kind of things. It's doable. But ultimately, are those technologies going to serve our interest? I don't know. Technologies are there. Whether or not they're going to serve our interest depends on you choose the right people, choose the right thing, come up with the right policy, government, and the product. And the same, they need to work together. Cannot rely on anybody else. Otherwise, it's going to burn the whole world down. Nobody's going to help you. Usually now you have enough time to think, so you should
No.
work.
No, it's just yes, there are lots of investment strategies. Lots of examples that you can promote economic growth, meanwhile cut down, be environmentally friendly. In addition to the housing, Professor Sun mentioned that something I'm very interested in. But you can invest in solar energy, solar panel. You can invest in wind power, right? That they create jobs. They will eventually will cut down the carbon emission. So it's a win-win, economically and environmentally. You're win on both fronts by investing in those kind of projects. In the United States, they're talking about if Biden becomes the president, we may have the new Green Deal. Of course, everybody has a different definition for what the Green Deal is, but the environmental friendly. I think we need to be changing the mentality. We cannot say, oh, if you develop the economy, you will have the environment has to suffer. Right? These two things, the economic development, economic growth, and environmentally friendly, these two things can go together. So if you are investing in the right sector, the right projects, and then we can achieve that goal. And again, the government needs to come in to play a leadership role and guide the corporations to do that. So there are a lot of examples for that. There's an example, a question about the cultural elements consideration in urban planning. If I may, I can mention a little bit. I don't know where the person asked that question coming from, but I think in Asia, in China, in Malaysia, in India, all these countries, when we plan our cities, we probably should have somewhat different planning from the Western cities, especially in the United States, just because of the large population we have in those countries, large population in those cities, high density of living. So you can't possibly plan a city like LA, which is depending on private cars, right? So all highways. So in these cities, I think the cultural elements need to come into play in terms of what kind of transportation system you have. What's the public transit oriented versus the private car oriented? What kind of housing we have, whether we live in high density apartment buildings versus detached single family homes in the United States. Even in the where people prefer to live. I think in Asian cities, people still prefer to live in cities, in the center of the cities where they offer best infrastructure, best services. While in the United States, everybody wants to live in suburbs. Like say Professor Sun lives in the kind of like a country with a nice environment in the backyard because they want to get away from the central city where they consider there are lots of problems, immigrants, minorities, with crimes and all that. But I think in Asian cities, there's still desire for urban living, for city center living. So those are some of the cultural, factors we need to consider when we plan our cities.
Yeah, yeah, the culture definitely. I want to add something. I forgot that question. I focused on one question. Let me add one more thing, couple of sentences on the culture thing. I want to give you example how the culture. Let's say, of course, what is culture? That's a different thing. I don't want to go to that discussion on what is culture. Let's focus on the urban part, the urban life. Okay. So in America, usually talk about transportation, talk about housing. Let's talk about the parks. Okay. And in China, lots of small parks. I don't know if you realize that we call it squares. Asian have lots of squares, 广场 or square. Those squares are just very small parks. What do we do there? and maybe there are a couple of shops around. But if you go to visit the Chinese city at the evening, before after dinner, you're gonna see lots of old folks dancing together or play some kind of traditional Chinese martial, those practice exercise. In the morning, people will sing and play instrument. They have a collective life. Americans, when we get old, what we do? Oh, maybe we're stuck in our own um, big house, or we go to a senior house, or I happen to have a couple of friends, we go to Starbucks occasionally. Chinese, Asian country has a family-oriented, collective thinking. We take care of each other. Americans rely on themselves. So I don't need kids. Kids go away. And the parents stay by themselves. They suffer. And they have a very lonely life. Chinese, Asian, seniors, they have a better quality of life. In the end, they enjoy them all better. So in urban planning, you can see those city life. They get it together, chatting, play chess, and play sword exercise. They sing together, they play instrument together, taking opera or some local those kind of style and instruments or music or dance or movement, martial arts. So definitely, culture is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's in our blood. It's in the air. We don't need to look for it. We're smelling it now. I'm smelling the individualism, America with a backyard, and then you're smelling a Malaysia culture with apartment. That's called a culture too. So don't think. Just look into our daily life. We're going to see the imprint of culture on our cities, urban planning, and even how our economy is organized, how we treat old people, how we treat immigrants, how we treat the old ladies, how we treat women, how we treat the lesbians and then those and the different groups, how we build the city, how we arrange it, how we plan it, everything. So just to see expand the conversation a little bit, culture is ubiquitous even whether no you smoke or whether how you drink, what you drink, and who you're gonna play with, what kind of game you're gonna have, everywhere.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Huang. Yeah.
Oh no, I just want to thank Professor Sun for bringing in this aspect of basically public space. You know, how do we build, plan public space in our cities, and then the collective culture in Asia obviously play a major role here, and it really demands more public space, more accessible public space in our cities. In the United States, in the West, you know, people are not used to hang out with neighbors in these public space, although we do have some, but it's more so in Asian cities. So public space is a very important element when we plan cities in Asia.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Basically, I want to go for the concluding remarks for these sessions. Before that, I just want to add that today's session we come up with a very interesting idea about this sustainable cities, smart village concepts. What are the technology we can use for this smart cities concepts, and most importantly, we learn more about the education systems, how we should emphasize on education's policy, and how do we focus in between North America and China and Asian relationships. So you come up with a very interesting idea of development, and especially how we can reduce this unemployment things. So this is very important in present situation, and especially I do want to give a special thanks to the audience, those who observing to the sessions and come up with the very interesting questions, and our today's Professor San and Professor Huang for a very interesting session. Today we have a very good audience response. That's why I have to extend these sessions. It's actually really interesting sessions. So hopefully in the futures we're gonna invite you more for our policy discussions and more interesting discussions. So we do policy discussions with the governments, with the corporations, with the universities. So any of your ideas, support, definitely we're gonna collaborate together. Yes.
Well, I have one. You almost give me just a few seconds before you conclude the session. Okay. Before you turn off the camera, give me just a few seconds. You go ahead.
Yes, no, definitely. I go for the concluding remarks. Yes. So basically, we have I just want two sentences. We have Asia Research and Development Institutions, Al Noor Academy Sarhadia Barhad, as well as we World Talent Economy Forum. We are working together. So any of your intellectual support, intellectual collaborations is highly appreciable for us, because we try to grow together and we want to develop different kind of projects, research, and the policy related things. Thank you for your valuable time. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I want to request Professor Sun, then Professor Huang for the concluding remarks for today.
Okay, yeah, because the ladies will have the final word. That's Asian culture. Americans, no, we don't have that culture. In Asian culture, moms, they have the final word at home. So in society, they have too. So I will go first. First of all, I want to thank Sheriff again for getting me involved again, and the third time already. I hope, and the audience, I appreciate the questions, your attention to those discussion. I hope my conversation does not pollute your idea, making you less smart. I don't want to do that. Okay, I only hope to become smarter and contribute to the future of the smart, I call super smart city region, make your life better, make your community better, make your country better. And that's my ending. But before I real ending, I want to offer you something, okay? Because I'm adding a book. It's called World Original Book. I locked all the authors, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, and the two authors have to quit because of the restructuring of the program, too much burden. So now I have two chapters available. One is a chapter on Korean and Japan. One. Second is on Southeast Asia, Malaysia. Sheriff, you should be able to find some to write the chapter for me. So that's my kind of trade, for you. We did this for you. You find a professor and geography or urban planning background to work on. I have two spots available because we're ready to sign the contract with the publisher at the last moment, and the two authors backed up because of COVID-19, the restructuring of the program. So that's my request to you, offer to you guys money. Hey, there's money. Each chapter accounts for 1% of the sale. The book will be sale about $70 US, and you get 1%. Each book is 1%. That's a lot of money. Money matters. Hey, come on. We can make money. We need to make the minimum wage. That's more than minimum wage. That's my ending. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Sans. We have many professors and talent people in our teams. So any of your research-related support, Professor Huang, Professor San, from our organization, as much as possible, we will collaborate with you. And any of the interesting consultancy and other thing, we're going to invite you. And any of the research collaborations is highly appreciable. Thank you, Professor San. Professor Huang.
I just want to say thank you, Sheriff, for inviting me to this event. It was really enjoyable. Professor Sung, I've known him for a long time, but I actually haven't seen him for decades, probably 2 decades. So it's really a great opportunity to see him here, although online. As for the discussion today, I appreciate all the questions from the audience, and I can see there's, a tremendous interest in various aspects related to smart city and sustainability. And I think that's really the challenge the humankind is facing right now. And I just want to say one thing, whether you are policymakers, whether you are academics, when we think of sort of smart cities or sustainable cities, what is the ultimate goal? To me, the ultimate goal is really to to improve the well-being of the people, of the citizens in the city. So, the technology is really the tool. And I think we tend to be side distracted by, what kind of technology you are using, what kind of projects you are, So I really think if we have a very clear goal, and we will find a way to reach that goal. And the political will, people's voice, all those will come into play. But if you keep the well-being of the population, whether it's the affordable housing, whether it's a livable wage, whether it's inclusion of migrants and immigrants, all those will be solved eventually. So I just wanted to mention that as my sentence. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is actually very interesting discussions. We want to invite you more for our policy discussions, for our group discussions. So yes, it's really, really nice discussions, because we have to extend the sessions because of huge response from the audience. They are really interested about smart city, really interested about your point of views and others. And definitely your support and collaboration always welcome for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you, sir, for your valuable time and everything. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.